Hey there, sports history fans. Arnie Chapman of Fantasy Football Origin Stories here to tell you about a new way to play fantasy football this upcoming season. Tailgate Fantasy Sports is the game you've been waiting for. It's a new type of fantasy football that's totally free and easy to play. Just sign up with your email, pick your favorite NFL team, and set a 3-man lineup using only players from that team. Rotate 2 players each week and add power-ups to boost your players' scores. The best part? 1 random power-up drops every week. Now, it's not going to replace your existing leagues. In fact, it might be the way to get some of your favorite players on your home team. Because we all know how hard it is to get your hometown team's players in your home league, right? That is, if you truly follow some semblance of an ADP. I mean, come on. You think I'm getting Amon-Ra, the sun god, at market value in my home league? Pick number 7? You gotta be kidding me, dude. Get all the rules over at tailgatefantasysports.com. But the real action happens at tailgatefantasy.io. Tailgate Fantasy Sports, where true fans rule the game. Join now and help us put the word fan back into fantasy football.
We're so glad you're here because we are joined by an expert in sim football. Geoff Giordano joins us to tell us about his APBA Football Club and the gridiron history tied to the APBA game and how the gamers use it to preserve football history. Geoff's coming up in just a moment to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And welcome to another day where we get to interview a great guest talking about an aspect of football. And this one's going to be fun. We're going to be talking a little bit on the gaming side of football and talking a lot about pro football history too, I think. We have a gentleman named Geoff Giordano. He is representing the APBA football program. And Geoff, welcome to the Pig Pen.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank you, not just for this opportunity, but really for all the work that you do. We tabletop sports gamers, football simmers, Pigskin Dispatch is such an indispensable resource for us to really give us the flavor and the feel of different eras of football that we then go and replay. So thank you for all you've done.
Well, we're going to talk about that. Thank you for the compliment and thank you for listening. We're going to talk about that a little bit because I'm interested in hearing what you guys are doing with some of that history. That sounds like a pretty cool project that I'm sure listeners will want to hear too. But before we do that, let's learn a little bit about you. We love to learn about our guests. This is a sharing opportunity, and people come from all different sorts of backgrounds, have all kinds of different stories of their football fandom. Some are similar, some are different, but they're all interesting. So why don't you tell us how you got to the point of becoming a football fan, to the point of wanting to come on a podcast and talk about some football history in a game that you're playing?
Yes, sir. Well, fellow Steeler fan here. It was 1975.
Love you already.
There you go. Steeler Nation abides. Yes. I remember the first pro football I ever saw was probably a 1-minute snippet of what had to be Super Bowl IX. And as soon as I saw that Steeler helmet, the one-sided logo, it's like, that's my team. I just knew. I knew it. You know how that is. And when you're a kid, you're 10 years old. That first glimpse, it's really the uniform that often gets you. I think even John Turney was talking about that, how he of the SAC research with Nick Webster talked about the uniforms. So it was interesting because my father went to Long Beach Community College and their mascot were the Vikings. So he always bet on the Vikings, all 4 of those Super Bowls. So, fortunately, I guess that didn't rub off on me. But fast forward to 1977, and after the 76 season, I watched the first Super Bowl I ever watched was Super Bowl 11. And could easily have become a Raiders fan at that point, which,
right.
But, and, it was a heck of a game, obviously. I mean, compelling and, old man Willie and all that. And Biletnikoff's incredible performance. And that actually wasn't far from the APBA headquarters at the time in Lancaster, but didn't get bitten by the game bug then yet. And then we moved to Florida. My father was a journalist. I'm a journalist, and you have to move from town to town to get a job. Basically, there's only one game in town. So, we kept watching football. I wasn't much of a baseball guy, so football was this thing. He kept betting the Vikings. So, we ended up in Sanford, Florida, Central Florida. It was a suburb of Orlando. And around about that time, it's 77 and 78 and Super Bowl 12. I watched that one. It was that weird indoor kind of grainy look. I bet the first and last Super Bowl I ever bet on, I bet a friend a dime that the Broncos would win. And and then 78 came along and that regional aspect of watching the games, we saw a lot of AFC East games, Jets and Dolphins, things like that. But of course, the Buccaneers were 90 miles down the road, and they were getting, maybe not as much traction at the time, but certainly were very aware of what they were doing. But that 78 season and Bradshaw coming into that level of maturity, and with the new rules, the game opened up. It was a fascinating season to watch. And I feel so fortunate that, my parents, my dad was a Giants fan. And when he and my mom moved from Rhode Island to Illinois, he'd be cheering the Giants in the middle of Lombardi era Packerdom, the dynasty there. So he's kind of shouting in the apartment about how Bart Starr is killing him with short passes. And, it was so, he was always a football guy, and that persisted. And so, whereas folks got to actually see in our community, I mean, we've got folks who've been playing back to 1957, 1964 when these games came out. That 78 season to me it is so magical, and it's one of the most replayed games in this community. Super Bowl 13, it was just tremendous. And and from that point, after the Steelers started declining, which is reflected in the games, unfortunately. But I did get to go because my dad was an editor of a paper in Sanford, Florida. We had a press pass to see the Steelers in Tampa Bay. Again, Doug Williams era, Bucks had just lost that NFC Championship 9-0, could easily have faced the Steelers in Super Bowl 14. And so here it is, 1980, and I'm on the sidelines for the second half taking photos for this little paper in an Orlando suburb. And end of the game, Donnie Shell grabs this game-saving interception right in front of me. And it's like Shell, just like it looked like the blimp. I mean, it's so huge. This guy is just so huge. And I remember, early in the game, I hear this really loud thwack, and I turn around and Bradshaw's right behind me, like throwing and just warming up, and Franco's catching the ball. I was like, oh my God. I mean, it's just amazing, even though it was, an aging team at that point. So and I actually have video of that on my channel, because I, through the trading community, found that game of the Steelers at Bucks. Very close game. The Bucks were coming into their own. It was great to see. And it's interesting because in 1979 in Tampa Bay, one of the oldest APBA football leagues was formed. And so, it's just that confluence of things going on. And that's kind of my football story. My brother-in-law's a Rams fan. He's come up to New Jersey to watch the Rams lose a variety of games to the Jets and Giants. And so, but right now, looking forward to a great Steelers season. So.
Yeah, I think this looks very promising, the way they've rebuilt this team so suddenly, and some familiar faces, but a lot of new faces that can bring some great energy into it. But, going back to the 70s, I've had this discussion with other guests, and people of our generation that got to grow up in the 70s watching football. We have a special moment because football really had one of its major changes. There wasn't great rules changes. There was a little bit on the defensive backs, and they moved the goalposts from the goal line to the end line. But just the philosophy. The end of the decade, you had the West Coast offenses were just starting up. Bill Walsh and folks like that were just starting to figure that part of the game out. But earlier it was like the Miami Dolphins, they ran the ball and passed when you have to. The Steelers were in that mode. The Raiders were in that. You could probably throw the Cowboys in it a little bit, and you also had some scrambling quarterbacks, like Fran Tarkington and some others that were just made a really interesting decade. You got a little mishmash of everything, and it really wasn't one philosophical way to play football. We got engrossed in a bunch of it, and moving the goalpost, and defensive restrictions being put on defensive backs and that. So a great decade to grow up in. And I think also, and you alluded to it a little bit, Super Bowl 13 I played a lot of electric football when I was a kid, and I can remember getting that Super Bowl 13 electric football. Had the whole thing in there with the Cowboys and the Steelers, and then I got another set. I got the Super Bowl 9 one that had the Vikings on it, so I had two fields set up all the time. But the NFL in the 70s, they figured out how to market their product and market the teams and market the players, and that's when things really blew up. Football cards really ignited, and all the games and everything like you're talking about. And I'm sure probably, APBA sort of did that too at that time. Maybe that's a parallel story for them as well.
Yes, the 70s were that crucible of the transition to a really modern era of football. And yes, it was Super Bowl 13 that got me to finally buy one of the sports sims on the market at the time. Like we all did, read Street and Smith, and we saw the ads. And there was the APBA ad and the Stratomatic ad. And I know you featured Stratomatic on here with Michael Caine. That was an awesome show. And I still have my original. I sent in the coupons for both and got the sample cards. And I'm glad you mentioned the Topps cards, because what really got me into APBA, and I am not official, I'm just a fan, by the way. I'm not affiliated with the company at all. The APBA Football Club is the name I use. I'm just a one-man show with my podcast and all that. So, but the thing about APBA football is that they card every player on offense and defense, right? So you folks in podcast world cannot see that I'm holding up a deck of cards here, but as Mr. Hayes mentioned, the Topps cards era allowed you to collect all these great cards, and they were really some of the best designs in the 70s, I think, with the swashes on the top and the bottom, the 75 set, the 77 set, really great photos, the airbrushed the logos out and all that. And in fact, the 2005 Topps Heritage set revisited a lot of those designs, featuring the modern players, but the old design. So it's a very cool set to collect. But what APBA did when I saw the ad was they card every player on offense and defense and special teams. When I was collecting Topps cards, if you don't remember, in the 70s, you would get, a bunch of pictures of players, but the better teams would have like 20 players on the Vikings, the Raiders, but the Buccaneers would have 5. And one would be the punter, so, they didn't spend a lot of time at the camp taking the photos, but I would always take these cards and put them on the floor and try to think, what, if they could play a game, like, why can't the running back do this around, Tingelhoff or, whatever. And here, lo and behold, there's this game where every player is carded on a 2.5 by 3.5 inch card with rounded corners, and the name, the date, just like a trading card, but they work, and they reflect the stats of the game in every season. And you can really kind of see when you learn the game how, this person, if this is a breakaway running back, he's got these numbers, or if he's a scat back, he's got these numbers. If he intercepted a pass for a touchdown, you can read that on the cards, but the cards point you to a result chart. And from that point, that combination of I've got to have, you mentioned the electric football, which is super cool, and I wanted that so bad. But that Sears Wish book, it's like, well, this is a little smaller footprint, and it's like, oh, and it's stats too. So, man, I got that. I pulled it out, and it was like science too, because it says, these are scientific results. And APBA football came out in 1958, and I think it's the first stats-based game, certainly one of the first. And a really interesting time of the NFL we can get to, but getting all these cards out, and yes, John Kolb, who spoke at the PFRA in July, and Sam Davis and Mike Webster. I got my O-line, I got Benny Cunningham, but then he gets injured, and I got Randy Grossman to throw him in there instead, and I've got that incredible Steeler defense. It's like and I've got all the players, and I got all the backups too, so I can sub them in at the end of the game. I can put, Sid Thornton in for Harrison Blyer if I feel like it. So I was just like, oh my God, that was incredible. And, just one flavor of all the games out there. And there are a lot of games out there, and they're getting better all the time. But APBA is just the one that really, struck me, and is one that I've stuck with. And like I say, it goes back to 1958. Of course, a really important time in the NFL when with the Lions coming back from that huge deficit against the Niners. Really, it's a really prescient season to issue on the part of that company. APBA came out in 1951, mostly as a baseball company, but then with the that 57 thrilling finish, the Lions coming back to beat the Niners 31-27 in the Western Conference playoff and then winning the division against the Browns, slaughtering them in Detroit, and this game comes out right at the end of that season and right before the Colts Giants greatest game ever played. So what a pedigree. And that Super Bowl 13 didn't disappoint, and neither did Super Bowl 14 when I bought the next year's season set, because at the end of every season, like with every stats-based game, the companies will calculate these player cards based on, or team cards based on whatever formula they use to recreate these stats in the season. You can replay one team's season or an entire league and whatever you want to do. So that really just kind of synthesized it all to me. It was like a mind-blowing experience, and still is.
Okay, that gives a real good description of the history of the game and everything. For one, I had to play electric football. I wasn't smart enough to do the stat-based games. I tried Stratomatic, and it was a little bit too much for me. So electric football was a hands-on thing as a kid. We could put them in there, and the hardest thing was trying to find a little football after you kicked it or threw it. But they made more of those every day. But so I didn't get engrossed in. I collected the football cards. I loved looking at the stats and everything. But these aren't the Topps cards. The ones you were showing up. These are actual game cards. I'm assuming that the game manufacturer makes. Now, what happens? Okay, let's say you're in the middle of that 77 season and you have a Bradshaw card from the 77 set. Do they get issue when you buy a new set? They give you a new Bradshaw card. Maybe some of those numbers changed from the season before.
Exactly. So at the end of the 77 season, by July-ish, August-ish, by summer, you will see the 77 season released. And the way they used to do it was they would release it as the 1979 edition, which was a little confusing. And if you go back and start collecting the older sets, you'll see that the 1977 season set that represents those stats comes out in the middle of 1978, but is sold as the 1979 edition to give it a little more shelf life going forward. And yes, Bradshaw in 77, the Steelers were 9-5, so they're not going to be as powerful a team in terms of producing on the field, and they're probably going to lose more of the close games than they would say in the 78 season at 14-2, and the rules open up and Bradshaw is like completely on fire. The way the game works, kind of basically in a minute, is this: every year this season set comes out, and most of the players on any team are given a card. And those cards feature RP and K columns. And those columns are used to reflect the kinds of players or the kinds of stats those players accrued. So a running back who has 3 5s and 7s and 9s in the R column is more of a scat back. You would look more on the outside play chart. That's where he's really good. Whereas a Mark Van Eegen is a 4, 6, 8 guy. He runs inside or plunge really well. And then the guys who have 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 really are your Walter Paytons, your OJ Simpsons, your Jim Browns, who can run over you all over the place. And you'll see the breakaway backs have certain numbers at 66 or 11, 33, and 66. The formula's changed over the years, and I won't get all in the evolution there. But basically, when you pull out two teams, you create the starting offensive and defensive lineups. And they're pretty much exactly what they were. Not pretty much. They were exactly what they were in a game. The cards are created for all those players and even the substitute players. Each player is rated from 5 points best to 1 point lowest. You create your starting offensive and defensive lineups and total those points. You then compare the offensive team A to the defensive team B and come up with an offensive index, A, B, or C, depending on how many points ahead of the defense or behind the defense the offense is. And the range currently is, if your offense is 7 points ahead to 7 points behind of the defense, you're in the B index, which is a pretty wide swath, and that's where most teams reside. I mean, they could go either way. They're not your 85 Bears, who would be in the A index a lot of time, because oftentimes, well, actually they wouldn't be, because their offense wasn't super powerhouse. On A offense, think the 76 Raiders against the Buccaneers would definitely be 8 or more points against that Buccaneer defense. So Raiders would be operating the A index and they're coasting up and down the field. And then the Buccaneers would be in the C index because their offense is more than 8 points behind the opponent's defense. So you then, once you've got your lineups, you establish what offensive indexes are you in, you flip a coin. Who goes first? It's just the rules of NFL. You use your kicker card to kick, your returner card to return. You've got primary and secondary returners. There are injury codes on these cards, so you may lose a returner for a game, or you may want to try someone else who, if the other guy's rolling cold numbers, you want to throw in a backup, and then you start calling offensive and defensive plays. There are solitaire or head-to-head methods to play. On offense, you have in the old game, it was an inside run, an outside run, a short pass, and a long pass. In the 80s, when they came out with a master game in 1983 featuring the 1982 season, they added a screenplay, a draw play, and a medium pass. They added a trick play card, which you could use once a half, and an audible you could use once a quarter. So if your defensive coach you're facing called your exact play, named your ball carrier, or named your receiver, you could audible if you really were in a critical situation and change your play. Can't change your personnel, but you can change your play. So you've got your team indexes, team A, team B. You're calling plays. You call on offense your ball carrier or your receiver, and you call your play. Short pass to Franco Harris. On defense, you name one of 3 defensive lines: light, medium, or heavy. Light defends against the pass, standard defends pass or run, and heavy defends against the run. And you have some other options to prevent the pass game, nickel and dime packages versus a 3 wide receiver set, and a 2 tight end set to improve your run game. And the last real cool thing about APBA football is that the results charts are organized by field position. So it's very easy to get, there are charts for the outside run from your goal line to your 14-yard line, from your 15-yard line to the opponent's 31, from the opponent's 30-yard line to the 10-yard line, and then that deadly red zone where it's really hard to get yardage from your opponent's 9-yard line to your goal line. Okay, so it's that combination of what is the team offensive index, what's the field position, what's the defensive line setting. And so that's really how that game works. I mean, there are lots of different systems out there. Stratomatic does it differently. Second Season, which you've also featured, plays Second Season, does that a little differently. But all these games really allow you to immerse yourself in how these teams, it really feels like you're playing the 76 Buccaneers, that slog. You can't gain yardage. You can't do things. Even if you get good rolls, you still sometimes have just bad outcomes. You can't overcome, the deficiencies on your team because, let's say, for instance, the great thing about APBA football is that you can pick up a team and quickly assess, well, how do they relate in terms of their total points? What kind of an offense or defense do they have? The 62 Packers are famous for having 49 out of 55 points on offense, 47 out of 55 points on defense. The 85 Bears have 50 out of 55 points on their pass defense, and I think they're 47 out of 55 on their run defense. So they're pretty much going to stifle, weak teams or overpower them. And a 79 Chargers has a 40-point something offense, but a 30-point something defense. They can score, but they can't stop anybody. And it's a really great way to reference. And that's one of the things I do on my sites. I have an APBA football handbook site where I kind of recount those point totals as the game has evolved. So you can really kind of see, the 63 Bears have a powerful defense. And, the 1960 Cowboys who went 0-11-1, are a sub 30-point offense, and you're really not going to get a lot going. But sometimes you just can't help playing. Everyone loves to play the 76 Bucks. Can I win a game or two? It's just that lesson in futility. And I won 3 in my replay.
We're going to take a break for a moment from this interview and be right back after this message.
Hey there, football fans. This is Ross, the host of the Pigskin Tales podcast. I just need a few moments of your time to talk about the host of the Pigskin Dispatch podcast, Darren Hayes. He's expanded the Pigpen to search out information on the history of all team sports. It's a quest to find out about the competitors, teams, and places chronicled throughout athletic history through the uniforms and gear the participants used and wore. And he is taking you, the listener, with him on this educational journey to preserve sports history on the Sports Jersey Dispatch, found here on the Sports History Network. His newest podcast, called Jersey Dispatch, is all based on the jerseys that all the greats used to wear. You can find Darren Hayes and the Pigskin Dispatch podcast, as well as Jersey Dispatch, on your favorite podcast provider multiple times each week. So remember that. Darren Hayes, the host of the Pigskin Dispatch and Jersey Dispatch podcasts. It's found right here on the Sports History Network. The soundtrack is provided by Raphael Crux from filmmusic.io.
This is Greg Tranter, co-author of The Buffalo Bills, an illustrated timeline of a storied team book. And you are listening to the Pigskin Dispatch podcast.
And now we return to our interview with our special guest. You raised some questions for me. Okay, first of all, now I assume, is there a visual aspect to the game? Do you have like a game board or something so you have a point of reference to?
Basically, yes. The APBA football field is renowned for its slotted track for the football and for the down marker. Okay, and they used to be these really nice thick boards. Now, I've actually gotten some custom ones, and a lot of other folks have gotten custom ones as well. Next weekend, I'm going to be holding a 2-day cards and dice tournament at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So some folks create these custom fields. There's a gentleman named Bobby Porter who creates them for APBA folks. There's a gentleman named Paul Barone who creates them for Stratomatic folks. And yes, so you track the ball on the field, and you can get these fields that go back. You know, if you want a field that looks like the 1960s, you know, if you can find folks, there are a couple folks in the community who create custom versions of these fields, and you track the ball, you track the downs, you track the timeouts. It's really up to you how you want to customize this game. And it's just really, once you get going in this thing, you kind of can't stop, you know?
I guess the next question I have now, you're talking about, you just displayed and talked about some teams from different eras, from the 1950s all the way to more modern times. Now, can you play like, if you wanted to play the 58 Colts against the 85 Bears, could you do that and it would be a good game, or would it be
It would be a good game. In fact, I think I have them right here. I was going to bring some of these to Canton with me. Here are the, let's see. Here's some, here are the 58s, 58 Colts there, and the 85 Bears. I just happen to have them because I'm prepping to move. There's Richard Dent there. So, yeah, that would be a great game. I mean, the Bears offense is not going to be that powerful. The Colts offense will have enough points, I think, to be in a B index against the Bears. And, there are different versions of the game, and there are things called great teams of the past. And the game has evolved, so sometimes different eras of the teams will be a little different. They'll be carded, as they say, differently. But by and large, yes, that would be a great game. They did a world championship set where they featured 5 NFL championships. They released it in the early 70s. It was the 53, 59, 60, 63, and 65 championship. If you go to their stadium shop now, APBA has one of the greatest selections of seasons available. They've got every season set available from 1957 to 1969, most of the 1970s and 80s sets. And they're slowly working through recalculating a lot of these sets, but in the vintage market, they've got every set from 57 to 2021 so far. So, and lots of great teams. They used to do the 50 Browns and Rams, for instance, a great 2-point, that's an incredible game. Otto Graham. Who doesn't want to play a little Otto Graham versus, Van Brockman, Waterfield, and Fears and Hirsch? I mean, it's an incredible, you just get in that mood. And when you're listening to Pigskin Dispatch, it's like, oh man, you just talked about, I'm going to crank that game up again for sure,
Oh, that would be a cool one. I was gonna ask you about that if they went before 57. So I'm glad to hear that, especially the Browns and the Rams. The Rams had one of the most prolific offenses scoring wise of all time. They would be right up there with the Kansas City Chiefs of today, putting points on the board. So that's kind of a cool thing. And the Browns, they were just, they were dominant. So that's very cool. So you have this big tournament coming up next week next weekend,
the 26th and 27th.
So how does the tournament work? Can somebody come in and say, hey, I'm bringing X amount of teams and these is where I'm playing, or do you get into certain tournaments where, hey, you're a 1950s tournament and you're in the 1980s tournament? I mean, how does something like that get set up?
Well, the cool thing about this is you can create a tournament basically with any rule you want. So this goes back to, this is the 10 years after what we call kind of the summer of 2013 for APBA, APBA. When a company moved its headquarters from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Alpharetta, Georgia, there was a group of kids, the Bridesburg Boys and Girls Club outside Philly. And they had been going to Lancaster to play in which was a predominantly baseball tournament. And you bring any teams, the teams that won the prior year are disqualified from playing again. You can't play them. You can't bring that team. And so when the company moved, folks said, well, these kids can't play anymore. So why don't we create a tournament here to play in these young kids, Boys and Girls Club. And so they did, and they're going, in their 10th year. I just attended it. It's invitation only because of the kids, but there are more than 24 APBA tournaments, again, primarily baseball around the country. Chicagoland, Rob Spatz runs that one. His theme was the lonesome loser, and you can set, you have to pick teams within a certain winning percentage, or it has to be 500 teams or less. For my football tournament, it's pretty much all open at this point, but you could easily create a championship run for your 50s guys, for your 60s guys. You could say it's only going to be 1966 this year, and you could grab the teams out of a bag, whatever. Or this year I'm going to have, I think we have the 2017 Saints and Eagles, 2019 Chiefs, 2005 Broncos, 2020 Bucks. I'm bringing the 66 Cowboys. Steeler fan, I know, but Chuck Howley, man, I got to represent one of the class of 23 here. So, but yeah, you can set any theme you want, which is the beauty of it. We were just out at Play Games at play.com, which ran the same weekend as the PFRA annual event in Pittsburgh. And I played some APBA football, and we played second season. There was some strat football there, just all over. They run a very open forum. You can play whatever games or teams you want. I mean, they're focused on play games, which are awesome games, by the way, and play very well. And narratively, they reflect the stats in a narrative format. But you can set whatever parameters you want. We have a guy, Frank Fumai, who's going to have a baseball tournament on a cruise ship in January. I forget what his theme is, So, yeah, you can do whatever you want with these tournaments and set, it could be all AFC teams, all teams that made the wild or missed the playoffs pre-1970, pre-merger, teams that didn't make because there was no wild card, so something like that.
Now, have you ever taken, you're a Steelers fan, have you ever taken the cards and said, hey, I'm going to have a greatest Steelers ever type of thing. I'm going to have Franco Harris in the backfield, and maybe Roethlisberger throwing the ball, or Antonio Brown with John Stallworth out of Can you do that? And with these games, and I know they probably won't let you do it in a tournament setting, but that would be a pretty cool thing, and you're really covering some generations of history there.
Well, very glad you brought that up, because APBA has created. They released it in 1983, and there is a set. It's called the OFAS, Original Franchise All-Stars. There also goes by the name FATS, F-A-T-S, which is Franchise All-Time Stars. And it lists, this is the old version where it lists all the players on the envelope. So yes, you're going to have Franco Harrison, John Henry Johnson, and Bettis. Now this one, the original set only goes up to 1982, because that's when they redeemed the game in a big way. But if you collect the cards throughout the years, you can expand these sets. Yes, pretty much everyone here is a 5 out of 5 pointer. So playing them against a regular team kind of just ain't fair. But you could create a G-top only tournament. Yes. I mean, they tout this set as, I've got the in fact, one of my projects for my channel is the Bears all-time stars expanded to include, Willie Gault, because they, with the original set, they missed the 85 Bears. So Richard Dent and poor Stephen Michael and, Mike Singletary, and then the 2006 team, Earl Locker, you could get in there. And what I was going to do is I'm going to play the Bears all-time teams against their NFC Central all-time franchise rivals. So a quarter against the Lions, a quarter against the Vikings, quarter against the Packers, quarter against the Buccaneers, all-time Packers. So you could have, Bart Starr and Favre and Rodgers on your quarterback, and rotate them, give them one quarter each. I have a video where I did that with the Steelers and the Giants, in fact, because in 1970, of course, the Giants played in Pittsburgh. It was the first pro game at preseason game was at Three Rivers, and it was Bradshaw's debut, and you can watch that on YouTube. But yeah, you've got Bradshaw in the first half, Roethlisberger in the second half. You've got Buddy Dial and Lynn Swan and Hines Ward in a 3 wide. Yeah, it's incredible. That's why I love APBA, because you can do that. And the thing is, you could run a 4-3 in the first quarter and a 3-4 in the second. Doesn't necessarily quite matter, but there's ways you can modify. So I could have Lambert and Farrier, in the same, and Kevin Green, how many linebackers did they ever have? Tons, but you could do that, so it's super cool. Palomalu and, Donnie Shell and Mel Blunt in the same secondary. It's crazy. Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah, that would be. Wow. That is cool. All right. So I guess for somebody that's just like me, if you wanted to start off and do it, how would somebody get started into a game like this? Is there like a website to go to that gives you some basic instruction and like starter kits and things like that?
The tabletop sports game community is so generous with its knowledge and time. I would go through and look at some of the just the games out there, APBA, Stratomatic, and Play. And thank you again for promoting those games. There's a lot of other ones. If you ever played Pay Dirt or heard of it, Ron Pizar has resurrected that as a game called Data Driven Football. Al Wilson derived a game called Fast Drive Football using a bit of Play's system, and you can actually check that out, fastdrivefootball.com, and he actually let you download it for free. He suggests you donate to a charity. And, you can download the cards, get them printed, and it's a drive-by-drive game. It would really get you get your feet wet. You've got games like 4th Street Software's football game, PT Games as a football game, 49 Sports Games as a football game. There's Inside Sports that has 3 versions, Inside Blitz, 5D20 for more solitaire approach, Big Play Football, which is more of a quick play game by, drive-by-drive approach. So I would suggest that maybe you look around for some of those games. And, we can email me at apbafootballcluboriginal@gmail.com, and I can point you in some directions. But, all these companies, and a lot of them are one-man shops, have their games. They tell you how they work, whether it's 2D6 or 3D10s or whatever. And they're all stats-based. And then I would go on YouTube and just plug in the name of the game and demo, and you will find tons of gameplay examples. I do a bunch of mine for APBA Football. A lot of the creators, Grant Fines, 49, his 49 Sports Games. I just interviewed him, and his 2022 season is on pre-order now, his version of it. So yeah, there's a lot of information among the community. Digital to Dice podcast, Steve Towers After Further Review is a great podcast to watch. The Replay Gamer, Sportsman Z, you name it. There's tons of guys out there. If you want to know APBA football, you check out Greg Barrett, who calls himself Ogard62. You check out Gilles Thibault, who's they're both in the APBA Hall of Fame, which they've had since 2001. They put in the great contributors to the game in that Hall of Fame. So that's that's a short list of where I would start to look. I have a video on my channel called Replay Resources that kind of I list resources like yours to let people play games, but also I think I've listed, and if I haven't, I'll go back and list just like the top 20 or 30 game companies that are putting out stats-based games right now.
Wow. I mean, that is unbelievable in this day and age of a digital world to have these, hands-on tabletop, having pieces and cards and things like that, in this realm, and still thriving and having this many different businesses supporting them and folks playing them, and then, incorporating with the YouTube videos and websites and, forums, I'm sure. And, still getting in conventions like you're going to next week, where you can, and you mentioned 3 other ones you've been to this year, where you can get with some of your buddies and maybe some people you don't know, make new friends and, play these games. That is unbelievable to me. So what's the secret sauce? Why is this still such a popular game when somebody could probably take that same information, put it into something digitally, and turn it into not a Madden or anything else where you have a little bit more visual eye candy? But where's the satisfaction level? What gets people going on this game still?
I think, and a lot of those companies have PC corollaries. So Stratomatic has PC football, Data Driven has a PC. In fact, it started, I think, on PC, 4th Street, et cetera, have PC corollaries. There's a Pro Strategy Football by Kerry Batts. It's all digital. It's all on Steam. And it's stats based, and it's got that kind of arcade look, but stats based feel to it. But I think, I'm not as big a PC player simply because I really like to look at the cards. I can read, I can kind of see, what's happening, and I can really control more of it. It's very intimate. It's very tactile. And, we talk a lot about the future of cards and dice gaming, certainly. And I just gave a talk about that. And I thank Keith Avalone for giving me that opportunity at Play.con 23. Looking at the explosion of the so-called Euro games, Ticket to Ride, Wingspan, Settlers of Catan, and the relative kind of real small niche of these stats-based sports games. But it's that entity, that control, that collectability. I've got Clay Matthews, the grandfather from the 55 Niners, and Clay Matthews III from the 2009 Packers right here. And I don't have to fire up a console, Now, I remember, I love Madden too. Totally dig it. I think it's the 2004 version where they had all the classic teams. And I posted photos of all the, 99 is like the top player ranking. But when you look at that, I think they didn't have the licensing or something. So the jerseys and the names are completely wrong. Now you can re-edit the team, and, Bradshaw's like number 13, and it's Smith or, his quarterback, whatever. But in a console game like that, it still comes down to, well, are you playing at a rookie or novice or all pro? There are other factors in the game that, and not to mention your ability, dexterity with your digits there to kind of manipulate the game. And then you've got a CPU as well. But with cards and dice, you can not only modify, if you wish, add weather rules, home field advantage rules, momentum rules, but you can really see why you're getting the results you're getting based directly on your decision making. Whether it's, Stratomatic has results on the player cards, or APBA has numbers on the player cards that refer you to results charts by field position, defensive line setting, and offensive grade. So there's that little bit of mystery. And you're creating that visual in your mind. Play's second season is very narrative based, as are all play games. The stats are there for sure, but they code it in this, they enrobe it in kind of, it's like a Mac versus a PC. With a PC, you see all these, these really gory details of files and drives, but, with play, it's like, it's all there, but they do it with a very smooth, sharp narrative style. And you're just immersed. And once you start playing these games, whether it's solitaire and you can really control a project and your pace of play, it's like, I remember going back to my, young football fandom, you didn't have the marketing. You talked about the marketing really starting in the 70s. The Falcons and Saints always fascinated me because I collected the Topps cards and I love their uniforms. You'd never see them on TV. We just weren't in the market. But with APBA or Stratomatic, I got Haskell Stanback and Chuck Muncie right there. And I can see the uniforms, and I can look at, and, you'll see in a lot of the game sites, someone will post the Topps picture of the Topps card and a picture of the, the stats card there. And that it just, it really invigorates your mind. And I think, we talk about the future of tabletop sports gaming. I think, you might see this skew older. When we were kids, we didn't have video games. We had electric football for sure. But, as folks get older, I think they're going to really appreciate, again, they're listening to Pigskin Dispatch and gleaning these really incredible perspectives on, the 1932 football season. Now, I have a custom 1932 football season here. Someone did in the community just because they, kind of figured, well, they want to see the Bears and play that first ever indoor football game. And I know you've got a podcast or two on that, so I've got to go back to. So it's just that when and these AFL guys, these fans of the AFL, forget about it. I mean, they want to see if the Bills, they're convinced the 64 and 65 Bills, could beat the Browns and the Packers. So that's the kind of stuff that, these games, you could grab these two teams right off the deck here. Here's the, in fact, here's the 83 Raiders, and I can celebrate Greg Pruitt's birthday with his card. Let's play a tribute game to Greg Pruitt right there. So, and again, you can read on the card here that given the codes, he can be used as a running back or a wide receiver in that era. So you see what, is really going on. It's not kind of hidden behind code and visuals. That's why.
Yeah, well, that's very appropriate. You brought that up because they were recording. This is Greg Pruitt's birthday, and we're going to be this is going to be airing a few days from now, next week. But we also, in between there, we have an interview with our friend Rich Smelter, who has a game book out, and it's on the '84 Super Bowl where the Raiders played Washington, and Mr. Pruitt's name is brought up there too. So we have 3 different podcasts here in a week where we're talking about Greg Pruitt. Unless you're from the '70s and you watched games against the Browns and the Raiders, you probably don't know who Greg Pruitt was. But great player, and I'm glad we could talk about him as much as we did. So, Geoff, why don't let's before we close up here, let's you talked a lot about what your site has links to some of these other sites that you mentioned, and so maybe that's a good connection point for somebody that wants to get involved, and besides watching the YouTube videos and trying to figure out what gameplay they want to do, whether it's APBA or Stratomatic or whatever avenue they want to go to in the sim world. Maybe you're a good jumping off point to get into, to maybe at least you can maybe guide somebody if they need a little bit of mentorship or something. So why don't you go ahead, let's if you don't mind giving out your call signals for your website. We'll post them also on the show notes of this podcast and on pigskindispatch.com with the accompanying article.
Sure. I am kind of the outlier. I don't do a blog, Facebook page, which I started back in 2011, then took a break. If you look at APBA Football Club, just search for us on YouTube or Facebook. You will find us pretty easily, and I can send you the link so you put it.
Okay.
I don't have a Twitter anymore. We are on Instagram though. We're the only APBA Football. We're the APBA Football Club on Instagram, so you can check us out there. And like I say, you can always direct message me or email me at apbafootballcluboriginal@gmail.com. You'll see that I interview a lot of the designers out there, and I'm not the only one, of course. So just check us. You can search for us on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. And I try to vary the content. So as all good content creators, long form, short form, and all that. And I'm happy to help, and everyone in the community is happy to help you find the game that suits you. And there may be 2 or 3.
Well, Geoff, we really appreciate you coming on today, telling about this great game, and, sharing some events from some other games too that, we've talked about and that people are playing. And it's exciting to hear that, these handhelds and these tabletops are still being played and enjoyed by generations and big tournaments. And, I hope you have a lot of fun with your cohorts down in Canton next weekend, and have some good gameplay there too. So, Geoff, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, sir, again for the opportunity, and keep up the great work. We rely on you for, kind of understanding the history that we put in front of us on the tabletop once more.
Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.